I thought I was just doing my daughter-in-law a favor, taking her broken phone in for repair. But when the technician looked at the screen, his face went pale. He pulled me aside and whispered, "Cancel your cards, hurry up and run away." I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking. Then he turned the phone towards me, and what I saw made my blood run cold. "Before we continue, tell me where you're listening from. Don't forget to add your country's flag and the city you're in." I read every comment, and it truly warms my heart to see how far our stories travel. My name is Margaret Hill, though everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 65 years old, and until 3 days ago, I believed I had a perfectly normal life. I live in a comfortable craftsman-style house in Maplewood, Oregon, a quiet suburb just outside Portland, with my husband Robert, who's 68. We're both recently retired. I spent 30 years teaching high school history, and Robert was a civil engineer. We have one son, Ethan, who's been married for 5 years to Olivia. Our daughter-in-law always seemed like a charming young woman. She has a degree in business administration, intelligent, beautiful, and works for a financial consulting firm. Ethan met her at a mutual friend's party, and they married within a year. Sometimes I thought she was a bit distant, but I attributed it to work stress and her more reserved personality. It all started last Wednesday when Olivia came to visit us alone, something unusual, since she and Ethan normally came together on weekends. She arrived looking flustered, saying she had a problem with her phone. The screen was completely shattered, and she asked if I knew any reliable place to get it repaired. I dropped my phone without meaning to, and I need it working today for an important meeting tomorrow. Ethan's out of town on business, and I have no idea where to take it, she explained. By coincidence, I had taken my own phone for repair the week before to a small shop downtown. The owner, Ben Carter, was the son of a former colleague from the school where I taught. I offered to take her device to him. "That would be perfect, Maggie. You'd be saving my life," Olivia said, handing me the phone. "The passcode is 2802 wait, our wedding anniversary. I have to run to the office now. Can I pick it up tonight?" I agreed. "Of course." I took the phone and drove to Ben's shop. The place was small, tucked between a pharmacy and a bakery, with a discreet sign reading, "Carter Tech Repairs." When I entered, Ben was hunched over a table full of tiny tools and disassembled electronic devices. "Mrs. Hill, great to see you again," he greeted me with a smile. I explained about my daughter-in-law's phone, and he assured me he could fix it within a few hours. "I'll come back after lunch," I said, handing him the device and the passcode. I spent the afternoon shopping and returned to the store around 4 p.m. Ben was alone, and when he saw me enter, his face changed. The friendly expression gave way to something I couldn't decipher at first. Concern. Fear. "Mrs. Hill," he said in a low voice, glancing quickly toward the door as if checking that no one else was there. "The phone is ready, but I need to show you something." I frowned, confused. "Some problem with the device?" "No, not with the device," he replied. Then he approached, speaking almost in a whisper. "Cancel your cards, change your passwords, and run immediately." I felt a chill run down my spine. What? What are you talking about, Ben?" He gestured for me to come closer, opened Olivia's phone, and entered the messaging app. He navigated to a folder called Plan B and showed me the screen. My blood froze. They were messages exchanged between Olivia and my son, detailing a plan to kill me. "Mom's getting more forgetful," read one message from Ethan. "It's the perfect time. The doctor is already documenting her memory lapses at my request. No one will question it when it happens." Olivia's response made my stomach turn. "Her and your father's life insurance is worth almost $2 million. With the house sale afterwards, we'll have enough to start over far from Oregon." I felt my legs give way and had to lean against the counter. This can't be true," I murmured, more to myself than to Ben. "Mrs. Hill, I swear I didn't want to get involved." When I was testing the phone after the repair, a notification appeared, and I accidentally saw these messages. I couldn't ignore it. I kept scrolling through the conversation with my eyes wide with horror. They were discussing methods, dates, how to make it look like a domestic accident. They talked about medications they could use, Doses that would be fatal for a woman my age with high blood pressure, my own son and his wife coldly planning my death. They're also planning to kill Robert, I whispered, feeling breathless. The conversation detailed how they would eliminate my husband afterwards. It has to be a few weeks apart, Ethan had written. An elderly couple dying at the same time would raise suspicions. Ben closed the shop door and turned the closed sign around. He brought me a glass of water and helped me sit down. "You have to go to the police," he said with a firm but gentle voice. I shook my head, still in shock. "They won't believe me. It's the word of a forgetful old woman against my son and daughter-in-law, respectable people in the community." "Then, ma'am, you have to gather evidence, and you have to protect yourself." He was right. I took the phone with trembling hands and began taking photos of the messages with my own device. I documented everything: dates, times, the detailed plan, mentions of the family doctor who was apparently being manipulated to create a dementia history. "Ben, could you restore the phone to exactly how it was? I don't want them to know we discovered something," he agreed, and we worked together for another hour. When he finished, Olivia's phone looked intact, with no sign that her secret messages had been discovered. As I left the shop, I felt like I was in a nightmare. Portland's gray sky seemed even more somber. How would I go home? How would I look at Robert knowing that our only son was planning to kill us both? Driving back home, I planned every step. First, I had to alert Robert without frightening him too much. Then we had to act quickly, but intelligently. If Ethan and Olivia suspected we knew something, they might accelerate their plans or create a new strategy. The weight of the betrayal was almost unbearable. My son, whom I carried in my womb, whom I nursed, whom I helped with homework, whom I comforted when his first relationship ended. He was planning my death for money. I parked the car in front of our house and took several deep breaths. I had to stay calm. The life or death game had begun. And I had to be smarter than the two young people who thought a forgetful old woman would be easy. Pray. Little did they know that this lady had faced down the military draft during Vietnam protests when she was a student, had raised a son mostly alone while her husband traveled for work, had survived breast cancer 5 years ago. If they thought I was going to fall without a fight, they were very wrong. I got out of the car, holding Olivia's phone like it was a bomb about to explode. I entered the house where my life would never be the same. Robert was in the living room watching the news, as he did every afternoon. His familiar face, with gray hair and reading glasses perched on the tip of his nose, gave me an instant of normalcy amid the chaos that had settled into my life. "Were you able to get Olivia's phone fixed?" he asked distractedly, not taking his eyes off the television. I swallowed hard. "Yes, it's repaired. I had to tell him, but I didn't know how to start." "How do you tell your husband of 40 years that your only son wants both of you dead?" "Robert!" I called, my voice firmer than I expected. "I need to show you something. It's serious." Something in my tone must have alarmed him, because he immediately turned off the television and looked at me attentively. "What happened, Maggie?" I sat beside him and showed him the photos I had taken of the messages. I watched his face as he read. Initial confusion, followed by disbelief, then horror, and finally a pain so deep I thought he would collapse right there. "No," he whispered in a choked voice. "There must be some mistake. Ethan would never—" "I didn't want to believe it either," I replied, holding his trembling hands. "But it's them, Robert. It's Ethan's number. It's the way he writes." And Olivia responding from her phone, which is here with me. Robert closed his eyes and breathed deeply several times. When he opened them again, I saw something I rarely witnessed: absolute determination. "What are we going to do?" he asked. I explained my initial plan: document everything, check our bank accounts, change passwords, cancel shared credit cards, investigate which doctor might be involved in this. We had to act as if nothing had changed while secretly gathering enough evidence to confront them or, if necessary, take everything to the police. "Olivia is coming to pick up the phone tonight," I warned. We have to act normally. How? Robert's voice cracked. How am I going to look at her knowing that... The same way I taught teenagers to fake interest in medieval history for 30 years, I tried to joke, but the smile came out weak. One step at a time, Robert. Our lives depend on this. We spent the next hour reviewing online bank accounts. We discovered something disturbing. Small amounts had been regularly transferred from our joint account to an unknown account over the past 3 months. Amounts low enough not to raise suspicion. $200 here, $300 there, but totaling almost $10,000. Ethan has access to our accounts, Robert murmured. We gave him power of attorney last year, remember? In case something happened to us. The irony was bitter. We trusted him so much that we practically handed him the tools for our own destruction. We changed all passwords, canceled 2 credit cards that Ethan had as additional cardholders, and called the bank requesting a block on any transaction over $1,000 without in-person authorization. What about the doctor? Robert asked. Dr. Paul Morgan had been treating us for over 15 years. He was a friend. He occasionally had lunch at our house. The idea that he could be falsifying medical reports at my son's request was almost as painful as Ethan's betrayal. I'm going to schedule an appointment tomorrow, I decided. Alone. I want to see what he says about my memory. At 7 p.m. the doorbell rang. Robert and I looked at each other tensely. He squeezed my hand, a silent promise that we would follow our plan. I opened the door, forcing a smile. Olivia looked beautiful as always, with her brown hair impeccably styled and elegant clothes. That polished appearance now seemed like a perfect mask to hide the monstrosity beneath. Maggie, sorry for coming so late. How did it go with the technician? Everything went well, I replied, handing her the phone. Ben did a great job. The screen is like new. She turned on the device, quickly checked it, and smiled. Perfect. How much was it? Let me pay you. Don't worry, I already took care of everything. It was a courtesy. He didn't charge because I'm an old customer. Olivia hesitated for a moment, a slight frown that I wouldn't have noticed before. She was probably worried that the technician had seen something. Are you sure? I don't want to be a bother. Not at all, dear. Would you like to come in? Robert's watching TV. We were going to have some coffee. Oh, I can't today. I have a presentation early tomorrow and still need to review some data. I noticed how she avoided looking directly at me while speaking. A skilled liar, but now that I knew what to look for, the small signs were there. I understand. When does Ethan get back from his trip? Tomorrow night, she replied quickly. Another lie. From the messages, Ethan wasn't on a trip. He was at home waiting for news from her. Tell him to visit us soon, I said, keeping my tone casual. It's been almost 2 weeks since we've seen him. Of course. She smiled, putting the phone in her purse. He misses you both, too. Oh, I just remembered. Have you seen that Dr. Ethan recommended yet? The memory specialist? My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. We haven't had time yet. Why is that? Her face showed a mask of feigned concern. Ethan mentioned that lately you've been forgetting some important things. Names, appointments. It worried him. My memory is excellent, I replied with a light laugh. I even remember the day you wore that same outfit to my cousin Eleanor's birthday party 2 months ago. I saw something flash quickly through her eyes, frustration, concern, before her social smile returned. Well, it never hurts to get a checkup anyway, right? At your age, of course. I'll schedule an appointment soon. We said our goodbyes, and as soon as I closed the door, I leaned against it, exhausted by the effort of pretending normalcy. Robert was waiting for me in the living room, tense. How did it go? She tried to plant the idea of my memory loss, I replied, sitting beside him. They're building the scenario for when it happens. What do we do now? Act, I replied, determination growing within me. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to Dr. Morgan. Then I want to check our life insurance. We need to know exactly what Ethan has altered. And then we're going to set our own trap. That night I could barely sleep. Every sound in the house seemed like a threat. I got up 3 times to check if the doors were locked. During one of those times, I found Robert in the kitchen drinking water with the same tormented look I must have had. I'm thinking about Ethan as a child. he said quietly. Do you remember how he was afraid of the dark? How he ran to our bed during storms? What happened to that boy, Maggie? I had no answer. How our loving son had transformed into this calculating stranger capable of coldly planning our death was beyond my comprehension. We're going to find out, I promised, hugging him. And we're going to survive this. The next morning, I called Dr. Morgan's office claiming an emergency. I got an appointment for 10 a.m. Before leaving, we checked all our accounts online again and discovered something even more disturbing. There was a new life insurance policy in my name, taken out 3 months ago, that I had no knowledge of. How is this possible? I asked, horrified. Robert navigated through the digitized documents. Look, the signature is yours. I moved closer to the screen, incredulous. The signature really resembled mine, but I had never signed that document. They forged my signature, I murmured. And there's more. Look at the value, 1.5 million, and the only beneficiary is Ethan. The reality of the situation finally hit me with full force. This wasn't just a vague plan. They had already taken concrete steps. Documents had been forged. Money was being diverted. A doctor was possibly involved, and now a life insurance policy I knew nothing about, ready to be collected after my accidental death. I left home feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. The consultation with Dr. Morgan would be crucial. I needed to discover how deeply he was involved in this conspiracy. The office was quiet at that morning hour. The receptionist, who had known me for years, smiled when she saw me. Mrs. Hill, so good to see you. The doctor will see you shortly. Less than 10 minutes later, they called me in. Dr. Morgan, a middle-aged man with gray hair and usually a friendly expression, seemed slightly uncomfortable when I entered. Maggie, what a surprise. Ethan called me yesterday. He said you were reluctant to get examined. I kept my expression neutral as I sat down. Really? That's odd that he'd say that. Actually, doctor, I came because I'm concerned about my memory. The doctor nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. Yes, Ethan mentioned some concerning episodes. Forgetfulness? Confusion? Curious, I replied calmly, because I don't remember having any problems like that. Dr. Morgan hesitated for a moment. Well, Maggie, sometimes the patient doesn't perceive their own lapses. It's common in early dementia cases. And you already have a diagnosis, apparently. He seemed increasingly uncomfortable. No, of course not. But Ethan showed me some videos. You confusing dates, forgetting names of close people. Videos? I asked, genuinely surprised. Can I see them? He didn't leave me copies, but... Dr. Morgan, I interrupted, leaning forward. I've been your patient for 15 years. Do you know me? Do you really think I have dementia, or are you just believing what my son says? The silence that followed was revealing. Finally, he sighed. Maggie, Ethan came to see me several times in recent months, very worried. He said you and Robert were losing the ability to care for yourselves, that you needed supervision. He asked me to document any signs of cognitive decline. And you agreed? He had the decency to look ashamed. I only noted what he reported. I didn't diagnose anything without examinations. I stared at him, letting the silence extend until it became uncomfortable. Dr. Morgan, my son is planning to kill me and Robert. The shock on his face seemed genuine. What? Maggie, that's a very serious accusation. I have proof. And now I understand why he needed your involvement, even indirectly. A medical history documenting cognitive decline would make my death much less suspicious. Dr. Morgan visibly paled. His normally steady hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his glasses. Maggie, I would never, ever participate in something like that. I believed Ethan was genuinely concerned about you. I took out my phone and showed him some of the photos I had taken of the messages. As he read, his face went from disbelief to horror. My God, he finally murmured. I had no idea. I want to see my medical file, I demanded. Now. He hesitated only a moment before accessing his computer and opening my medical history. He turned the screen so I could read. There it was, documented in impersonal clinical language. Patient present signs of cognitive decline, as reported by son. recurring episodes of confusion, temporal and spatial disorientation, forgetting names and recent events. Neurological evaluation recommended. This is a lie, I said firmly. And you know it. Maggie, I only recorded what Ethan reported. I didn't confirm or diagnose anything. But you created a record that could be used against me. An official medical record suggesting I'm losing my mental faculties. Perfect for when I died accidentally, don't you think? The doctor looked genuinely disturbed. What do you want me to do? First, print this file for me with your signature. Then I want you to make a new entry dated today, stating that you personally evaluated me and found no signs of cognitive impairment. He agreed immediately, clearly shaken by the situation. And doctor, I added as he typed, if anything happens to Robert or me, this file and our conversation today will be the first things the police see. I left the office with the documents in hand, concrete proof of the conspiracy against us. Dr. Morgan had been manipulated by Ethan, but his complicity, even through naivety, could have cost us our lives. I drove to the bank next. I needed to personally verify our accounts and, most importantly, revoke any power of attorney we had given Ethan. The manager, Mr. Matthews, who had handled our accounts for years, was visibly surprised when I requested to revoke the power of attorney. Mrs. Hill, are you sure? Your son approached me recently saying you and Mr. Hill would like to expand his powers to handle finances, since Mr. Hill isn't doing well health-wise. Another lie. Robert was perfectly healthy for his 68 years. My husband is very well, Mr. Matthews, and yes, I'm absolutely certain. In fact, I want to review all movements in our accounts for the past 6 months. We spent the next hour reviewing statements. Besides the small transfers we had already identified online, we discovered something even more disturbing. Ethan had initiated the process to obtain a second credit card for Robert, claiming the original was lost. He said Mr. Hill had lost his card but didn't want to bother him with the bureaucracy, the manager explained. Clearly embarrassed now. And you issued a new card without the cardholder's presence or signature? I asked incredulously. Mr. Matthews shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Well, since he had power of attorney and already handled several financial matters for you. I took a deep breath, containing my rage. Cancel that card immediately and block any future attempts at issuance without our physical presence. When I left the bank, I felt simultaneously relieved to have interrupted another aspect of the plan and terrified by the extent of the plot. Ethan had methodically prepared the ground, creating a scenario where our death would seem natural and he would have total control over our assets. On the way home, my phone rang. It was him. My heart raced, but I answered with the most normal voice possible. Hello, son. Mom, everything okay? I just got back from my trip, and Olivia told me you took her phone for repair. That was very kind of you. The naturalness with which he lied was impressive. There had been no trip at all. You're welcome, dear. The repair guy is the son of a colleague of mine. He gave us a good price. That's great. Listen, I was thinking of stopping by tonight with Olivia. It's been a while since we had dinner together, hasn't it? A chill ran down my spine. Why this sudden interest in visiting us? Had they noticed something? Had the doctor called Ethan after my visit? Of course, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Come over. I'll make that lasagna you like. Perfect. Oh, and Mom, did you go to that doctor I recommended? Olivia said you still hadn't been. Actually, I went to Dr. Morgan this morning. A brief silence. You did? And what did he say? Nothing out of the ordinary. He ran some simple tests, said I'm perfectly fine for my age. Another silence, longer this time. Ah, well, that's good then. But maybe it would be good to get a second opinion, you know? Sometimes Dr. Morgan is very conservative with diagnoses. We'll see, son. So we'll see you tonight then? Yes, around 70. See you later. When I hung up, my hands were trembling. The apparently innocent conversation was loaded with threatening subtexts. Ethan clearly expected Dr. Morgan to have declared me with some type of cognitive impairment, and he was destabilized when he learned that wasn't the case. And now he wanted to have dinner with us tonight. Why? To observe my behavior? To check if I showed any suspicion or something worse? I'm so glad you're still here. Could you do me a little favor? Tap the like button and leave a blue heart below. It makes me really happy to know you're still here. I arrived home and found Robert in the living room surrounded by papers. He looked up anxiously. How did it go? Is the doctor involved? I explained everything. How Ethan had manipulated Dr. Morgan to create a false medical history. How he had gained access to our bank accounts. How he forged insurance documents. And he just called me, I concluded. He and Olivia want to have dinner here tonight. Robert paled. Do you think they suspect we discovered something? I'm not sure, but he was clearly disturbed when he learned I went to Dr. Morgan and that the doctor found nothing wrong with me. We looked at each other, the same silent question floating between us. What might Ethan and Olivia try during this dinner? We can't eat or drink anything they bring, Robert said finally. And one of us must always be alert, watching what they do. I agreed. We need to record this dinner somehow. If they say anything incriminating. Robert nodded and went to get his old digital recorder that he used to use for work meetings. We tested the device, checking if it still worked and where we could hide it in the dining room. I spent the afternoon preparing the lasagna I had promised. Though the idea of sitting at the table with two people who were planning to kill us made me physically ill. Every time I thought about the messages, about the cold calculation with which our own son discussed our death, I felt a pain that no words could describe. How did we get to this point? I asked Robert as we set the table for dinner. Where did we go wrong with him? Robert shook his head, his eyes showing the same pain I felt. I don't know, Maggie. I thought we knew our son. At exactly 7:01 p.m., the doorbell rang. Robert and I exchanged one last confirming look. The recorder was hidden under the table, running. Our strategy was simple. Act naturally, observe their every move, and if possible, provoke some slip that we could document. I opened the door with a rehearsed smile. Ethan and Olivia were there, him holding a bottle of red wine and her carrying a box of chocolates that they knew were my favorites. Mom! Ethan exclaimed, hugging me enthusiastically. The physical contact that once gave me comfort now sent chills down my spine. How could he embrace me knowing he was planning to kill me? So good to see you, he continued, handing me the bottle. We brought a special wine for tonight. Oh, thank you, dear, I replied, discreetly analyzing the label. It was an expensive vintage, one that would normally impress me. Now it only made me wonder if it was tampered with. Robert received them in the living room, his smile as forced as mine. I offered them water, coffee, or juice. Anything except the wine they brought. Not yet, Mom, Ethan said, settling comfortably on the sofa. Let's save the wine to go with dinner. We talked about trivial things for almost half an hour. Their work, the weather, local news. The surreal normalcy of the situation nauseated me. I watched as Ethan occasionally exchanged glances with Olivia, how she was attentive to my every movement, how he directed apparently innocent questions about my routine, my medications, my recent difficulties. So, Mom, he said finally, leaning forward, how exactly was the consultation with Dr. Morgan today? Did he run tests, order any specific exams? I kept my expression neutral. It was a normal consultation. He didn't see anything concerning. Strange, Ethan murmured, frowning. He had told me he suspected something more serious. Maybe early Alzheimer's. Really? I asked, raising my eyebrows in false surprise. When did he tell you that? Ethan realized his slip. Last week when I called to talk about those episodes I noticed. What episodes would those be, son? I don't remember having any problems. A condescending smile appeared on his face. See? That's exactly what worries us. Don't you remember? Last week you forgot Mrs. Patterson's name, our neighbor for 20 years. Then you left the stove on for hours. None of that had happened. They were fabricated lies to build the narrative of my supposed dementia. Curious, I replied calmly. I spoke with Mrs. Patterson yesterday, calling her by name, and I haven't used the stove in days. I've been preferring the microwave lately. Ethan's smile faltered for an instant. Let's eat, Robert intervened, standing up. Maggie's lasagna smells wonderful. At the table, the theater continued. I served the lasagna while Robert discreetly switched the wine glasses. We had agreed to pretend to take the wine they brought, but actually drink from another bottle we had opened previously in the kitchen. A toast, Ethan proposed, raising his glass. To family and health. We raised our glasses and pretended to drink. I watched carefully as Ethan and Olivia took their own sips. They drank normally, without hesitation. Maybe the wine wasn't tampered with after all. Maggie, Olivia said, putting her glass on the table. Ethan and I have been talking. We're worried about you two living alone in this big house. That's right, Ethan added, especially considering these recent episodes. We think maybe it would be better if you moved to a smaller place, easier to maintain. Or maybe we could come live here with you for a while. I felt Robert tense beside me. This was it. They wanted to move into our house, be closer to execute the plan. How kind of you, I replied, keeping my voice steady. But we're perfectly fine, aren't we, Robert? Absolutely, he agreed. In fact, we're even thinking of traveling soon, maybe a season on the coast, in Cannon Beach. I saw Ethan and Olivia exchange a quick glance. Travel? Now? Ethan questioned. I don't think that's a good idea, Dad. What about Mom's doctors and your routine checkups? Everything's excellent, Robert replied. We can travel with peace of mind. Olivia smiled, but her eyes remained cold. Do you need help planning this trip? I could look for hotels, packages. That won't be necessary, I cut in. We've already taken care of everything. The dinner proceeded with that underlying tension. In every apparently innocent question, I recognized the true intention behind it. They were evaluating our mental state, trying to establish control, looking for ways to get physically closer to us. When I served dessert, a homemade apple pie I had made carefully in front of Robert, Ethan returned to the subject. I've been talking to a lawyer, he said casually. About broader powers of attorney. You know how it is for emergencies. What kind of emergencies? Robert asked, his voice controlled. Well, if one of you needs to be hospitalized, or if, things get worse with Mom's memory. The lawyer suggested a full power that would give me authority to make medical and financial decisions for you. I looked at my son, studying his face. That same face I had kissed as a baby, that I had comforted as a child, that I had photographed proudly at his graduation. How had it transformed into the mask of a calculating stranger? That won't be necessary, son, I said finally. We've already updated all our documents recently. We even made some changes to our will and insurance beneficiaries. Ethan's expression froze for an instant. Changes? What kind of changes? Nothing major, just making sure everything's in order in case something happens to us. Olivia put her hand on Ethan's arm as if restraining him. It's always good to review those documents, she said softly. Did you consult a lawyer? Yes, Mr. Morrison, the one you recommended, Robert lied with impressive naturalness. He was very helpful. There was no Mr. Morrison, but the lie achieved its objective. Both seemed momentarily destabilized. At 10 p.m., Ethan looked at his watch and announced they had to leave. I have to work early tomorrow, he justified, but I knew the real reason. They needed to recalculate their plans. After many false embraces and empty promises to visit us more often, they finally left. As soon as the door closed, Robert and I collapsed on the sofa, physically exhausted from the effort of maintaining appearances. They're suspicious, Robert whispered. They realize something has changed, I agreed, getting up to retrieve the recorder. We rewound the recording, listening to the entire conversation again. The implications were clear. Ethan and Olivia were still determined to proceed with the plan. But our recent moves, the medical consultation, the banking changes, the mention of the will, had made them cautious. They're going to try something soon, Robert said. They can't wait much longer now that we've started taking protective measures. We need more concrete evidence, I said. The recording helps, but it's still not enough for the police. What if we tried to get them to confess? Confront them directly? I shook my head. Too risky. They'd deny everything and become more vigilant. That night we checked all the locks 3 times before going to bed. Still, I slept with a phone beside the bed and a chair propped against the bedroom door. Precautions I never imagined needing to take against my own son. The next morning, I woke startled by the sound of a car parking. I ran to the window and saw Olivia getting out of her black SUV alone at 8 a.m. on a weekday when she should be at work. "Robert," I called urgently. "Olivia's here." He got up quickly, still groggy. "Alone? Where's Ethan?" "I don't know." "I'm going to answer, but stay close." I went downstairs trying to control my breathing. Why would Olivia come so early without warning? What did she want? I opened the door even before she could ring the bell. Her face registered surprise for a moment, quickly replaced by a rehearsed smile. "Maggie, sorry for coming so early. I was passing by on my way to work and thought I'd drop off these documents that Ethan set aside for you." She was holding a yellow folder. "What documents?" I asked, not attempting to take it. "About that power of attorney we talked about yesterday, and some articles about early Alzheimer's treatments that might help slow the disease's progress." She extended the folder again. "Ethan is really worried about you." I looked at the folder for a long moment. It was a trap. It had to be. Maybe documents already prepared with my forged signature, like the life insurance we had discovered. "Why don't you come in?" I invited, keeping my tone casual. "We can have some coffee and look at it together." Olivia visibly hesitated. "Actually, I'm running late for work. I just wanted to leave this for you to read at your leisure." "I insist," I said, opening the door wider. "Robert just made fresh coffee. It'll only take 5 minutes." Reluctantly, she entered. I led her to the kitchen where Robert was already there, appearing calm while drinking his coffee. "Olivia, what a pleasant surprise," he said. "She brought some documents for us to sign," I explained, emphasizing the word sign. Robert understood immediately. "How nice," he responded. "Let's take a look." Olivia seemed increasingly uncomfortable as Robert took the folder and began examining the documents. I watched her carefully, noticing how her eyes followed his every movement, how her fingers drummed nervously on the table. "Interesting," Robert murmured after a few minutes. "This power of attorney would give Ethan total control over our finances and medical decisions. It would practically make us legally incompetent." "It's just a precaution," Olivia justified quickly, "considering Maggie's condition." "What condition would that be exactly?" I asked directly. "Well, the memory lapses, the confusion." She hesitated, apparently realizing she was on dangerous ground. "Ethan has noticed several episodes." "Curious," I commented. "Dr. Morgan didn't find any of that yesterday." "Doctors can make mistakes," she replied, recovering her composure. "That's why it's important to get a second opinion from a specialist." Robert put the documents back in the folder and pushed it toward Olivia. "We appreciate the concern, but we're not going to sign this. In fact, we've already started proceedings to revoke the limited power of attorney we gave Ethan last year." The shock on her face was genuine and momentary, quickly replaced by a studied expression of concern. "But why?" "Ethan just wants to help." "We're sure he does," I replied, "but we prefer to maintain control of our own lives." Olivia stood up abruptly. "I have to go." "I'm really late." "Of course," I said, walking her to the door. "Tell Ethan we'll call later to talk about these documents." As soon as she left, Robert and I looked at each other. The same conclusion evident to both of us. "They're accelerating the plan," he whispered. "Yes," I nodded. "And that means we have to act now." After Olivia left, Robert and I carefully examined the documents she had brought. As we suspected, the power of attorney would give Ethan absolute powers over our finances, properties, and medical decisions. There was also a voluntary admission form for a rest home, actually an institution for elderly people with severe dementia, with spaces for our signatures. "They're not even trying to hide it anymore," Robert murmured, his fingers trembling as he leafed through the papers. "They're practically asking us to sign our own death sentence." "That's good," I replied, surprising him. "The more explicit they are, the more evidence we'll have." I spent the morning photographing every document, creating digital copies that I sent to Elaine Cooper's email, my longtime friend and the only person outside our home I trusted completely. I briefly explained the situation and asked her to keep the files safely without talking to anyone about it. "What do we do now?" Robert asked when I finished. "We need a plan." "They're clearly moving forward. Olivia's surprise visit, these documents. We can't wait any longer." We decided it was time to seek professional help. Not the police yet. We still didn't have enough definitive evidence, but a lawyer who could guide us on how to legally protect our assets and, more importantly, our lives. We chose a lawyer we hadn't known previously and who had no connection to Ethan, Linda Myers, specializing in family and criminal law. We managed to schedule a consultation for that same afternoon. In her elegant downtown Portland office, we explained the entire situation to Linda, the messages discovered, the bank accounts, the fraudulent life insurance, the manipulated medical records, the documents Olivia had brought that morning. The lawyer listened attentively, taking occasional notes and asking for specific details. When we finished, she took a deep breath before speaking. "Mr. and Mrs. Hill were dealing with an extremely serious situation. What you've described constitutes various crimes: conspiracy, document forgery, attempted fraud, and more seriously, conspiracy to commit murder." "Do we have enough evidence for the police?" Robert asked. "The messages are the most compelling evidence. But since you obtained them by accessing Olivia's phone without her authorization, there's a risk they could be considered inadmissible evidence. However, considering the gravity of the situation and the imminent danger to you, I believe we can build a solid case." "What should we do first?" I asked. "Immediately, we're going to prepare legal documents revoking any existing power of attorney and blocking the possibility of new powers without the presence of an independent lawyer. I myself can serve as a witness to your mental capacity. Then we're going to file a detailed complaint presenting all the evidence we have so far." We spent the next 2 hours signing documents, formalizing statements, and planning each step. Linda was thorough, ensuring every legal aspect was covered. "Now," she said finally, "we come to the most urgent matter: your physical safety. I strongly suggest you don't return home today." Robert and I exchanged alarmed looks. "Do you think we're in immediate danger?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Based on what you've told me, yes. They've realized you're taking protective measures. Olivia's surprise visit this morning suggests urgency on their part. If I were you, I'd spend a few days in a hotel under a different name until we can get a restraining order." We left the lawyer's office with a folder full of documents and a sense of urgency. We went directly to the Maplewood Police Department, where we filed a detailed complaint. The duty sergeant, Detective Raymond Salas, listened to our story with growing concern. "This is extremely serious," he commented after examining the evidence. "I'm going to assign an investigator to the case immediately and request discreet surveillance for your residence." When we mentioned that the lawyer had suggested not returning home, Detective Salas agreed emphatically. "Actually, it would be safer if you stayed elsewhere for now. But first, I'd like to send a team to install discrete cameras in your house with your consent. If they try to enter or do something, we'll have concrete evidence." We agreed to the plan. We would return home briefly, just to collect some essential belongings while the police installed surveillance equipment at strategic points. Then we would go to a hotel in downtown Portland, away from our neighborhood, using false names as suggested. During the taxi ride back, Robert remained silent, staring out the window. When we were almost there, he finally spoke. "I never imagined the day would come when I'd be afraid of my own son." I squeezed his hand. There were no words that could ease that pain. Our house, seen from outside, looked strangely normal. The same windows, the same garden we had cultivated for years, the same mailbox that Ethan had painted as a teenager. It was hard to believe that this place that represented safety and family had become the setting for a conspiracy against our lives. The plainclothes police arrived discreetly in an unmarked car. They entered through the back door and worked quickly, installing small cameras in strategic locations: living room, kitchen, hallways, entrances. They explained that the images would be transmitted directly to the station and monitored 24 hours a day. Meanwhile, Robert and I packed the essentials: clothes for a few days, medications, important documents. I avoided looking at the family photographs on the wall, the objects that told the story of our life together. Every memory was now contaminated by the betrayal. "We're ready," announced the officer in charge of the installation. The cameras are practically invisible to the naked eye, but they capture everything in high definition. "If anyone enters, we'll know." He handed us a small card with a phone number. "This is a direct line to our team. Any emergency, call immediately." When we were about to leave, my phone rang. It was Ethan. I looked at the police officer, who nodded, indicating I should answer normally. "Hello," I responded, trying to sound natural. "Mom, where are you?" "I stopped by your house and no one answered." My heart raced. He had gone to our house while we were away. "Why?" "We're shopping downtown," I lied. "We needed some things." "Ah, I see. It's just that I got worried. You never go out without letting us know." The falseness in his voice made me nauseous. It was a last-minute decision. "We're heading home now." "Perfect. Because I have a surprise for you. I'm waiting here." I froze. He was in our house at that very moment. "A surprise?" I asked, maintaining my voice steady. "What kind of surprise?" "I brought that wine you like. I thought I'd spend the afternoon together, talking about those documents Olivia left this morning." The police officer made a signal for me to keep the conversation going. "How thoughtful, son." "We'll be there in about half an hour." "Perfect. I'll be waiting." When I hung up, the officer was already communicating with his colleagues. "Suspect on the premises." Repeat, "Suspect on the premises." "Maintain distance, but be ready." Turning to us, he explained, "We're going to let him stay. Watch what he does. If he tries to plant something, drugs, poison, anything, we'll have it on video. It would be irrefutable evidence." The plan made sense, but the idea of Ethan wandering through our house, possibly preparing some trap, terrified me. "What if he discovers the cameras?" Robert asked. "Highly unlikely. They're the size of a button and placed in strategic locations. Besides, we have agents discreetly positioned around the block." We went to a nearby cafe where we waited anxiously for news. With each passing minute, I imagined what Ethan might be doing in our house. Preparing some trap, planting evidence against us, searching through our belongings. After 40 minutes that felt like an eternity, the officer received a call. He listened carefully, making affirmative gestures with his head. "He's out," he reported after hanging up, "and we have something interesting on the recordings." We quickly returned to the station, where they took us to a room with several monitors. Detective Salas was already there, watching the recording from the cameras installed in our house. "Mr. and Mrs. Hill," he greeted us gravely, "I think you should see this." On the screen, we saw Ethan entering the kitchen with 2 plastic bags. He looked around, checked that he was alone, and then began acting methodically. He took several medication containers from the bags and placed them in our medicine cabinet, mixing them with ours. Then he opened a wine bottle, probably the surprise he mentioned, and added some kind of white powder, mixing carefully before putting the cork back. Finally, he took a small electronic device from his pocket that we didn't recognize and installed it discreetly under the kitchen table. "Probably a microphone or camera," Detective Salas commented. "My God," I murmured, my hands covering my mouth. Seeing my own son on video deliberately preparing what appeared to be our death was indescribable pain. "Now we have more than enough evidence," the detective said. "I'm going to issue arrest warrants for Ethan Hill and Olivia Hart-Hill immediately." "What did he put in our medicine cabinet?" Robert asked, his voice trembling. "We need to analyze it, but from the appearance, they're controlled medications, possibly in elevated doses. The substance he added to the wine will also be analyzed, but I'd bet on some type of potent sedative." Detective Salas put his hand on my shoulder. "Mrs. Hill, I know this is extremely painful, but you need to understand. Your son was actively trying to kill you today. If you had returned home and drunk that wine—" I couldn't contain my tears. The reality of the situation finally hit me with full force. It wasn't just text messages or suspicious documents. It was my son in our kitchen, deliberately poisoning drinks and medications he knew we would use. "What happens now?" Robert asked, embracing me while I cried. "We're going to arrest them today," the detective replied. "With this evidence, there's no possibility of bail. You're safe now, but I still recommend staying at the hotel for a few days until we resolve everything." As we were leaving the station, trying to process everything that had happened, a police officer approached hurriedly. "Detective Salas, we just received a call. Ethan and Olivia Hill are at the Hills house right now. They seem agitated. They're looking for them." The detective reacted immediately. "Tactical unit ready. We're going now." Turning to us, he explained, "They probably realized something's wrong, that you didn't come home as promised. We're going to arrest them right now. Can we go with you?" I asked, surprising myself. Part of me wanted to run, never see Ethan or Olivia again. But another part, perhaps the stronger one, needed to be there, to witness the end of this nightmare. The detective hesitated, but finally agreed. "You can stay in the police car at a safe distance, but you won't interfere in any way." On the way to our house, with my heart beating wildly in my chest, I wondered how we had reached this point. How my son, whom I had held in my arms as a baby, had transformed into this stranger capable of coldly planning my death. When we arrived, several police cars were already discreetly positioned around our house. Over the radio, we heard that Ethan and Olivia were still inside, apparently arguing about what to do. "They realize something's wrong," a police officer commented. "They're trying to call the Hills' cell phones repeatedly." Indeed, my phone had rung several times in the last few minutes. Always Ethan. I ignored each call, following police instructions. Detective Salas personally coordinated the operation, speaking quietly over the radio with the various positioned agents. "Units in position," he finally announced. "We're going in 1 minute." It was then that we saw movement. The front door opened and Ethan came out hurriedly, followed by Olivia. Both carried backpacks and seemed agitated, looking nervously around as they headed to the car parked at the curb. "They're trying to flee," Robert murmured. In an instant, several police officers emerged from their hiding places, surrounding the couple with weapons drawn. "Police! Stop! Hands where we can see them!" I saw the shock on Ethan's face, the panic in Olivia's eyes. For a moment, Ethan seemed to consider running, but quickly realized he was surrounded. Slowly, both raised their hands. In seconds, they were immobilized, handcuffed, and placed in separate vehicles. Everything was so fast and organized that it seemed unreal, like a movie scene. Detective Salas approached our car. "It's done. Both are in custody, charged with attempted murder, conspiracy, and various other crimes. We found the tampered wine and the medications he planted. We're going to analyze everything." I looked through the police car window and saw my son being taken away, handcuffed, in the back seat of a patrol car. Our eyes met for a brief moment. I didn't see remorse in his eyes, only rage and perhaps surprise at being caught. In that moment, a strange sensation overcame me. It wasn't relief, it wasn't satisfied revenge. It was just a deep emptiness, as if something fundamental had been ripped away from me. We returned to the station where we gave more formal statements. The police had found various incriminating items in Ethan and Olivia's backpacks. The original medications from the containers he had planted in our house, more doses of the powder. He put in the wine, plane tickets abroad for the next day, and a considerable amount of cash. "They were ready to flee," Detective Salas explained. "They probably realized something was wrong when you didn't come home as promised. The plan was clearly to leave the poisoned wine, wait for you to consume it, and escape before the bodies were found." Robert held my hand tightly as we listened. Each new detail was like a knife through my heart. "Can we see him if we want?" Detective Salas offered, after finishing the bureaucratic procedures. "They're in separate cells awaiting transfer." Robert shook his head. He wasn't ready yet, and I respected that. but something inside me needed to look into my son's eyes one last time. "I want to see Ethan," I said, surprising everyone, including myself. The detective led me down a long, cold hallway to a small room with a table and 2 chairs. "We'll bring him here. We'll be watching through the glass, and if you feel any discomfort, just raise your hand and we'll interrupt immediately." I nodded, sitting with my back straight and hands folded on the table to hide their trembling. A few minutes later, the door opened and Ethan entered, handcuffed and escorted by a police officer. His face was pale, his eyes red, his hair disheveled. He seemed to have aged 10 years in a few hours. The officer made him sit across from me and left, staying just outside the door. For almost a minute we remained in silence, just looking at each other. Ethan was the first to speak. "They set me up," he said in a low, bitter voice. "This is all a big misunderstanding." "Don't lie to me," I replied calmly. "Not now. It's over." Ethan looked away, his jaw tense. "What do you want me to say?" "I want to know why. Why your own father and me? What did we do to deserve this?" He looked at me fixedly again, something cold and calculating in his eyes that I had never noticed before. "Money, Mom. It was always about money. You have so much. The house, the pensions, the investments, the insurance. And what do you do with all that? Nothing. Living your little mediocre lives, saving every penny as if you were going to live forever." I felt the blow of his words, but maintained my composure. "And that justifies killing us?" "It was Olivia's idea at first," he admitted, as if that absolved him somehow. "She works in finance. She realized how much you were worth and was tired of waiting. 'Why wait decades for an inheritance,' she said, 'when we can start our real life now?' And you agreed just like that so easily?" He shrugged. "Not immediately, but she convinced me it would be better for everyone. You were already old. Eventually you'd start having health problems. You'd suffer. It would be a favor, really." The coldness with which he spoke chilled my blood. This wasn't the son I knew or thought I knew. "A favor," I repeated slowly. "Poisoning your own parents would be a favor." "It wouldn't be painful," he replied as if that mattered. "You'd simply fall asleep and not wake up. No suffering. Like the wine you prepared today." Ethan remained silent for a moment. "How did you find out? It was the messages on Olivia's phone, wasn't it? That idiot technician?" "Yes, it was the messages. But even without them, we would have figured it out eventually. You weren't as smart as you thought, son." He shifted in his chair, the handcuffs clinking. "And now you're going to testify against your own son? Send me to prison? Were you going to make it look like an accident? No one would suffer. You'd die peacefully, and I'd finally have the life I deserve." "The life you deserve," I repeated, letting the words float in the air between us. I looked at him, really looked at him, trying to see beyond the anger, beyond the coldness, searching for any vestige of the child we had raised. I found nothing. "I don't recognize you," I said finally, my voice almost a whisper. "The son we raised, whom we loved, whom we protected, where is he?" "I'm here," Ethan replied, a flash of emotion crossing his face. "I'm me. I just grew up. I just got tired of waiting my turn." I stood up slowly. "You'll have a good lawyer. We'll pay for that. It's the last act as your parents. But don't expect anything more from us, Ethan. What you did has no way back." "Mom," he called as I was already at the door. I turned one last time. "You don't understand. I just wanted a chance to really live. We gave you every chance, son. Education, love, support. The choice of how to live was yours, and you chose this." I left the room feeling like each step required enormous effort. In the hallway, I found Robert waiting with red eyes. his face marked by tears he wasn't even trying to hide. "What did he tell you?" he asked quietly. "The truth, finally," I replied. "He did everything for money. Our death would just be a means for him to have the life he deserves." Robert closed his eyes, deep pain contorting his face. "How didn't we realize? How didn't we see what he became?" I had no answer. The same question tormented me. We left the station in silence, heading to the hotel where we would spend the next few nights. In the taxi, Robert spoke little, absorbed in his own thoughts. I knew he was reliving every moment of Ethan's upbringing, searching for the exact point where something went wrong. At the hotel, a simple but comfortable place in downtown Portland, we requested a room with 2 single beds. Neither of us mentioned it, but we both knew we needed our own space that night. The pain was too personal, too deep to be shared, even after so many years together. I lay down exhausted, but sleep wouldn't come. Images of Ethan as a child mixed with the vision of him putting poison in the wine, creating a waking nightmare I couldn't escape from. When I finally fell asleep, it was a restless sleep, full of confused dreams where I ran through endless hallways, pursued by shadows with my son's face. I woke startled by the sound of my phone. It was Detective Salas. "Mrs. Hill, sorry to call so early. We need you to come to the station as soon as possible. There's been a development in the case." The grave tone in his voice alarmed me. "Did something happen?" "I prefer to explain in person. It's better if you come as soon as you can." I woke Robert and told him about the call. Within 30 minutes we were at the station, being led directly to Detective Salas's office. "Mr. and Mrs. Hill, thank you for coming so quickly. I have complicated news." "What happened?" Robert asked, his voice tense. "Olivia Hart-Hill has requested to make a full statement in exchange for a reduced sentence. She's willing to testify against your son." I felt a knot in my throat. "What did she say?" "According to her, the original plan was just to steal from you, divert money from accounts, obtain powers to control assets. The idea of physically eliminating you only came up in recent months, when Ethan realized you might discover the diversions." Robert squeezed my hand tightly. "She also claims," the detective continued, "that Ethan was also planning to kill her after you were dead and he had access to all the money. The revelation hit like a bomb. My son was planning to kill his own wife. According to her, yes. She found messages from him with another woman discussing how they'd split the money after the Olivia problem was resolved." I closed my eyes, trying to absorb this new layer of horror. It wasn't enough to plan our death. Ethan was willing to eliminate anyone who stood between him and the money. "There's more," Salas said, his tone even more grave. "We analyzed the powder he put in the wine. It's a mixture of potent sedatives and a substance called oleander, extremely toxic, causes cardiac arrest. And we found evidence that he had tried before." "How so?" Robert asked. "Hair samples from you, Mrs. Hill, revealed traces of the same substance, probably administered in small doses to simulate natural health problems. That would explain the memory lapses he claimed you were having. They weren't lapses. They were symptoms of gradual poisoning. The room seemed to spin around me. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself as the cruel reality hit me. My son had already begun poisoning me slowly, methodically. For how long? I managed to ask. It's hard to pinpoint, but based on what the samples indicate, at least 3 months. 3 months. I mentally reviewed the small signs I had ignored. More frequent headaches, moments of dizziness, sleepless nights. I attributed everything to stress, to age, never imagining I was being slowly poisoned by my own son. In the weeks that followed, we put the house up for sale, started the process of finding a new home, and tried somehow to rebuild a sense of normalcy. We found a small apartment downtown, completely different from the spacious house where we had raised Ethan, and slowly began transferring only the items that didn't bring painful memories. Meanwhile, the legal case progressed. Olivia reached an agreement with the prosecution, accepting to testify against Ethan in exchange for a reduced sentence. Ethan, on the other hand, maintained his stance of denying the more serious charges. claiming everything was more than a family misunderstanding and that the evidence had been manipulated. 2 months after his arrest, we received a letter from him from prison. Robert wanted to burn it without reading it, but something in me needed to know what he had to say. The letter was short, written in the familiar handwriting I would recognize anywhere. Mom and Dad, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to say this. Everything I did was out of love. Yes, I wanted the money, I wanted freedom, but I also wanted to save you from the suffering of aging, of becoming dependent, of losing dignity. I don't expect forgiveness. I know what I did is unforgivable in your eyes, but I want you to know it wasn't out of hatred. It was out of ambition. Yes, out of greed maybe, but also out of a distorted form of love. One day, when you're ready, I'd like to see you again. Until then, know that despite everything, I'm still your son. Ethan. I read the letter 3 times, trying to find sincerity in the words, some vestige of the son I knew. But all I saw was more manipulation, more attempts to justify the unjustifiable. Years passed. The legal case concluded with Ethan receiving a lengthy prison sentence. Olivia, despite her cooperation, also faced significant time behind bars when her previous crimes came to light, including the suspicious death of her uncle years before, Robert. And I learned to carry our story without letting it completely define us. When we met new people, eventually the truth came out. Our city wasn't that big, and the case had been notorious. But we discovered that most people were compassionate, respectful of our pain. Some nights I still wake up startled, remembering that moment in the electronics shop when Ben turned the phone screen toward me and my world collapsed. But those shadows from the past appear less frequently now, overcome by the light of the present, the small daily joys, new friends, rediscovered hobbies, the love that survived the unthinkable. On our 50th wedding anniversary, after everything we had endured, Robert and I sat on the balcony of our apartment, looking at the starry sky. Who would have thought, he commented, holding my hand, that after everything, we'd be here together, survivors. I smiled, squeezing his hand. More than that, I corrected. Living, and he was right. We weren't just surviving. We were living fully, consciously, gratefully. We had learned the hard way that life is fragile, that the most intimate relationships can hide terrible secrets, that betrayal can come from where it's least expected. But we also learned that human strength is extraordinary, that it's possible to start over even after the worst devastation. That love, true love, not the distorted version Ethan claimed to feel, can survive even the worst storms. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this story, the ones on your screen are just for you. If this story brought a word, a thought, or a feeling to your mind, share it in the comments. Let's see whose words will touch the most hearts.